What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video. Make sure you leave a comment. You might have seen this guest on, other people's shows, other forums, but I think that, me bringing him on is a little different than other people because he was actually a cop at the prison that I was at while I was there. So we're going to get into it. Rob, tell the people who you are, talk a little bit about you, and we're going to talk about all the crazy shit that happened while we were at Coleman, with Sharma and how she ends up with a life sentence. We'll talk about that stuff today.
Well, my name is Rob Farlow. I go by the name The Stone Sailor. That's the cannabis. I'm a cannabis advocate I'm a veteran, 20-year veteran of the Navy, and I spent 7 years in the federal penitentiary as a corrections officer in Penn 1 after I retired from the Navy. I suffered a major spinal injury, and I was retired medically, so now I just, I enjoy cannabis. I'm trying to get my own brand out there, and I'm trying to get people out of jail for cannabis because nobody should be in jail for cannabis. This cannabis shouldn't be a crime. So I'm pushing for full legalization of cannabis, and all the prisoners that have been arrested or been convicted of cannabis crimes should have their records expunged or pardoned. So that's what I'm advocating for.
Well,
and prison reform, Chad, too.
We got an ex-cop that's looking for prison reform. All right.
Absolutely. I knew that from day one. The minute I stepped on the tier, I knew it was like the perfect business model. They just want to keep people in here and make money off of them, use them as slave labor. And most of these guys were in there for 25 and 30 years. And I would look at their jackets and I would see literally like a couple sugar cubes of crack. Nobody got killed, no gun, nobody got so much as a bloody nose. And these guys are getting 25 years, 27 years in a penitentiary because they don't cooperate, they don't want to talk on somebody, or they got nobody to tell on. And it's terrible. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars. I researched the law. I researched about the 94 crime bill. Joe Biden put this in effect. He destroyed a lot of lives. There was a lot of fathers taken off the streets. There was a lot of people that were charged like gangsters, and all they were was really drug dealers. They were trying to make some fast money. I'm talking about nonviolent drug dealers. I'm not talking about El Chapo and shit like that. I'm talking about these street kids that were just walking around trying to make some money. They see that there was no opportunity where they were. I'm not saying what they did was right, but at the same time, the punishment should fit the crime, all right? And it doesn't, clearly. We have it's a for-profit system. You know what I mean? They want to keep you going in. And then when I saw the private prison industry, I said, no way. No way in the United States of America should it be profitable to keep a citizen in prison. What world am I living in? And this is what I learned from working at the prison.
We're going to talk about some of that stuff. I had a real close friend, Jimmy Romans. I've mentioned him before. I interviewed him. He had a life sentence for marijuana, cannabis. I ended up doing his clemency petition while I was at the prison with him. And I got out before him and advocated, and he had some other people advocating. But I wrote his clemency petition, and he got out of jail, but had life for weed. No violence, no guns, no none of that, but he had life. So I definitely understand how all that stuff works. Definitely against people getting life sentences for marijuana, stuff like that. But I want to talk about your experiences, man, in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I want to talk about maybe, a little bit about the spinal injury, what you're doing now. And, we'll start off, you get out of the Navy, right? And you end up going to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. What's the first prison you work at?
The first prison they sent me to was the Medium. I was there for about 8 months. And then I told them either transfer me or I'm quitting.
And how
I just couldn't deal with it there. It was, honestly, it was like... The people I worked with were some of the most pettiest people I've ever met, and it really wasn't the inmates at the Medium why I left. I'm an action guy. Chad, look, I was a bomb detection dog handler. I used to look for bombs. Okay, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I want to do something. I want to be in a place where I just feel comfortable. I did 2 tours to Iraq, counter IED, military policeman, 20 years, canine handler. I mean, I like action. The Medium was too slow for me, and they made much to do about nothing. They would have people would walk in and the warden would want you to write a guy a shot for having a half a head of lettuce in his. I'm just not down with that. So I said, either transfer me somewhere else. I had a friend from the class that went to Penn 1. A couple guys went to Penn 2. And I remember I just put in a transfer. I said, any Penn or I'm going to quit. And they sent me to Penn 1. I had to go talk to the warden, and he said, I'll send you to Penn 1 if that's where you want to go. I got one because there's a guy there that wants to come here. I said, no problem. Give it to him. And that was it.
Let me ask you this, right? When you talk about petty stuff, and I want to shed a little light on the Federal Bureau of Prisons, I want people to know, I'm not saying all cops there are bad, because they're not. But a lot of them go out of their way just to fuck with people, right? Have you seen that? Have you experienced that?
Of course I saw it. Of course I saw it. It used to make me nauseous. I used to step in and mediate a lot of times because, listen, I wasn't some 24-year-old punk. I had 20 years in the Navy. I was in war. I'm a 38, 39-year-old man. I treat grown men with respect. I give it and you give it back, and we'll get along famously. You know what I mean? Not to mention the fact my father was an inmate. My father was convicted of murder when I was 8 years old. First degree, sentenced to life in Trenton State Prison. I used to have to, my father wasn't exactly like a choir boy. He was in the underworld. And he killed somebody over drugs, over a drug deal. He tried to rip the guy off and, it turned bad. Bottom line, my uncle was a drug dealer. My cousins were drug dealers. They had all been to federal prison. I grew up in that, but I always knew, I know the ramifications to have to go visit your father in a visiting room in Trenton State Prison. Not to mention, I got to meet Hurricane Reuben Carter because he was there with my father when my father was serving time. He actually put my father in his book, The 16th Round. He talks about my father. They worked in the bakery together and they were friends. So bottom line, I understood how the family suffers when someone goes to prison. I knew that this is someone's father, someone's uncle, someone's brother, someone's son. Treat people with respect, you'll get it back. And that's what I did. And I wouldn't tolerate. I remember when I first got hired in orientation, everyone had to stand up and give a little bio about themselves. And I just stood up and I said, listen, my name is Rob Farlow. I came from the Navy. I retired. I'm here. If you do something wrong in front of me, I'll report you. Because that's exactly what I told everybody at INDOC the first week in class. And I knew right then and there, a wise man gave me words of wisdom a long time ago when I was in the military doing security, doing police master at arms, which I was in the Navy. If you let people know up front, if you're not one of those guys that'll play ball, let them know up front. That way, whoever wants to work with you from that point forward, is on the level. You know what I'm saying? You're not being pressured into doing shit that you don't want to do, maybe lie on something. That's why I just tell people straight up, look, I go by the book. If I see you doing something wrong, I'll report you. And if you see me doing something wrong, you better fucking report me. And that's how I roll, man. I wasn't there to make friends, Chad. Like I said, I was already retired. I was already on my second life. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. So let me ask you this, right? Is there an unwritten code in there? And you may remember this guy. We'll talk a little bit about him. Lieutenant Phelps. He had a funny shaped head, kind of cool, got along with everybody. He ends up becoming a captain, and then he goes over to Raybrook, and then he goes to USP Lee, and they kill someone over there. He killed a prisoner inside the wreck cage. And I heard he got jammed up. I don't know exactly what the outcome was. But was there an unwritten rule kind of like, hey, man, if these dudes get out of line, we're smashing them? I'm talking about the prisoners. Were the cops, were there some cops that were in unison like, yo, we're going to smash these dudes if we got to?
Here's the thing. They knew not to say that. Like, they knew if they called me for a team, they knew not to pick me. You understand what I'm saying? They fucking knew that. They knew. So if there was any if they were trying to do any retaliation or anything like that, they knew better than to do it in front of me. Look, I had a guy that was on dry cell one night, and a lieutenant, dry cell, right? I don't know, your audience probably familiar with it, but it's not really a fun post to have as an officer because you have to watch a human being defecate in a bag, and then you have to search the bag for contraband. And people go on dry cell when they're suspected of ingesting contraband in the visiting room. So this gentleman had been witnessed eating something. They thought it was, drugs. They put him in there. And you don't get out of that place until you have 3 successful clean bowel movements. They don't give you X-Lax. Everything, you're stripped down to a gown. Everything you eat, you got to eat with your hands, and it's given to you on a tray. And I have to check everything before I give you, annotate it, what's on the tray. And when you give it back, I have to check everything. I have to make sure there's no contraband. And then I put it in a special garbage bag, and that garbage bag is supposed to go to SIS. I mean, this is by the book. So when I got there and I was getting ready to take a post, and they go, "You're on dry cell tonight." I'm like, oh, Jesus. So I go there. And I sit down and I see this guy, and he's covered in his gown. He's got feces on, and it's a paper gown. I mean, it's, you know. And I said, "What's up with that?" He goes, "Hey man, I had to take a dump. Now listen, when the guy defecates, you don't uncuff your hands. You don't uncuff his hands. He's got to poop with his hands in front of him, and he has to squat over one of those bowls in the hospital, and he's got to defecate." So then you hand him toilet paper. He's supposed to wipe himself and things like that. He's got, you know, feces on him. And I said, "Dude, we got to change that out." He's like, "Yeah, I tried to, but they didn't want to give me a new gown." I said, "Well, all right." And I called up because where I was, there was no gowns. I had to have somebody bring it to me because I was in an isolation thing. And I called up and a particular supervisor said, "Well, he was making it." I go, "He needs new clothes. We have to get this taken care of." And this person told me, a lieutenant, "Well, we're trying to make things uncomfortable for him." I said, "Sorry about that, wrong guy." I said, "I'm giving him a gown." I hung up. I wrote it in the logbook. I got him a new gown, allowed him to clean up, and because I have to sit there with this guy, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's on behind the bars, but you know, we're right there, you know. And things that from my hand go to his hand, and there's feces. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just unhygienic. It's inhuman. It's cruel and unusual punishment is what it is, in my opinion. And I wrote it in the logbook. And as soon as because it was a night shift, as soon as it turned 8 o'clock in the morning, I called SIS and I reported it. They came in, they seized the logbook, and I told the guy, I said, "Listen, everything I wrote in that logbook about what I said to her and everything, I wrote it in that logbook, and your family can subpoena that logbook. That's a public record. I'm not telling him to take legal action. I'm just letting him know if that's the way he chooses to go, there's records of it." Now, they did call me in, and they did investigate that lieutenant. I gave a statement against that lieutenant, but they didn't fire her. That's my experience. That's one of my experiences.
I mean, just dirty stuff. They do dirty stuff sometimes. You ever get the feeling where, like, the cops hate the prisoners? Like, you just hate these people just because they're in jail?
Yeah, some do. Some do have that. I remember I was working visitation one time, and I was sitting there, and we were doing the count at the end of the day. And we would write how many visitors came in, how many inmates had a visit and everything. We'd have to do these numbers and input them into the computer. And after the compilation was done, he went, "Okay," and you had this little side block, and he wrote with a pen futures. Like, you wrote how many inmates, how many visitors, how many, you know, children. He wrote futures. And I'm like, okay, this is how many inmates we had. This is how many visitors. This is this and that. I'm like, what's this number futures? He goes, "Oh, those are the kids that came in." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, they're going to be future inmates." And I looked at him. I said, "You know, I was one of these fucking kids, you piece of shit. You know, I was one of these kids." And I looked at him. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." And he knew that he got me upset. I'm like, what a piece of shit you are. Just because a kid comes here, you think that because their father's in jail, that automatically they're going to be in jail too? So yeah, you do meet people like that in there. I never said another word to that goddamn motherfucker. And I worked there 8 years, and we would walk by each other. I never even said nothing to him. I wouldn't even talk to him.
So how about this? I was in the jail before where, you know, you were probably one of the cops where people are like, you know, I was at that complex at the same time as you were. Dudes are like, "Man, dude's all right, man. Like, he don't go out of his way to fuck with us. You got something coming. You get it." You were that type of cop. And you know, I met cops like that. And those are the cops that I like. Like, I know what to expect, man. Dude's all right. You know, you've been down that road. You got family members. So you were all right. I mean, when I was in Coleman, we had a cop in there, Johnson, black dude. He stood on the table when he got when the quarter started. He said, "Look, man, stand up for my count. Don't be using no drugs when I walk by. Don't be raping and robbing or killing. And we're going to get along just fine. I'm going to leave you alone. You leave me alone." And
I know him. I got hired with him. He and I are friends. Yes, he's a good guy.
Johnson was a really good dude, bro.
Yeah, I know. He went to Penn too. Yeah, and I went to the medium, but I got hired with him. He was in my class, and Johnson's a good guy. I went to the academy with Johnson.
Definitely a good dude, man. I mean, some people might be like, man, he's saying the cops are good dudes. Not all the cops are bad dudes, man. There are some bad apples. There's a lot of bad apples, but in my opinion, but not all. Let's talk a little bit about Sharma. You worked there when that happened, right?
No, I didn't work there when the incident happened. I came on after, but I worked with her husband on when they would send me to the low to do like overtime or sick and annual where you would fill in. And I remember him as a lieutenant. And then one of the officers told me the story and he told me about what happened. And it was at Penn 1. And then I didn't even know. And then I went back to Penn 1 and then I started, because I'm inquisitive and shit. So I started talking to people that were working there when this happened. So I'm familiar with the story, yes.
So I'm going to tell people, Sharma was a female correctional officer that worked in the SHU. Her husband was a lieutenant. There was a kid over there named Animal. There was another kid that reached through the slot and grabbed Sharma, grabbed the female cop. I think he grabbed her by her woohoo, right? Mm-hmm. Grabs her woo. We'll call it a woohoo for YouTube purposes.
Woohoo, boohoo. Okay.
So grabs her woohoo. She's pissed off. She tells Animal, who's a known gang member, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hook you up with some cigarettes. Was it a pack, a couple packs of cigarettes, whatever it was? Okay. I want you to do something to this dude, right?
Well, I heard.
You tell him.
I heard that there was no cigarettes involved. I didn't hear. I heard that was something that was just, that was a lie. That there really wasn't cigarettes involved. I heard that she had made I guess he liked her as an officer and thought she was a nice girl. Of course, whatever. He's been in the hole, the Animal. So he was like, oh, that guy disrespected you like that, And she's like, yeah, I wish you would fuck him up for me or something like that. She made some off the cuff remark. Now, as far as the cigarettes and all that, I didn't hear that. Then the next day, now remember, Sharma's an officer. Her husband's a lieutenant at the low. She's at Penn 1. It takes the SHU lieutenant has to sign for a cell to be transferred. In other words, she just can't transfer a guy in with Animal. You understand? The lieutenant has to bottom line it. Now, could she recommend that? Yeah. Would they probably bottom line it without even asking? Probably. Bottom line, the guy that grabbed her got put in the cell with Animal that day, and Animal killed him brutally. I mean, stomped his head in, squashed him. So, and she was, the FBI came to her and they do what they do, Oh, we know how it is. You hate, these guys are a bunch of scumbags. Come on, he grabbed your crotch. Come on, anybody would do it. And unfortunately, Mrs. Sharma wasn't smart enough to tell them, I'm not talking to you, I want an attorney. And she gave a statement and they took that statement and there you go. She's doing life in prison. And there was another officer there named Kennedy. It got 8 years. He was part of the cover-up, I believe, afterward. I do know his sister, and she's a great woman, and she worked there. And he ended up doing his 6 or 7 years and getting out.
He was he the number one in the SHU? Is he the one that made the cell move?
I don't remember exactly who did what, but he was part of he testified against her. Because they were going to give him life, Chad. What was he? You know what I'm saying? I mean, they were going to fucking bang him out. They're like, look, you're going to testify against her and do 8 years, or you're going to go against us, and Jesus Christ can't beat us in court. They know that. These feds, Jesus Christ can't win a RICO case against these feds. And they make the laws, and they make them so you can't beat them. And that's just it. So, I mean, look, they just raided President Trump's house last night. If they could a search warrant, execute a search warrant on a former president of the United States, come in with the FBI with guns, seize his property, who the fuck are you to think that you could beat them?
It's definitely an uphill battle. And
Jesus Christ can't beat them in court. Get out of here.
You can't take over blood on the razor wire, bro. You got to let me talk too. So I want people to know that, Sharma ends up with that life sentence. Do you know if her husband stuck by her? Was he going, he's a lieutenant at the BOP. Was he going to visit his wife? Did he get rid of her? What do you think?
They did have a child they didn't. They sent her to a whole nother state. They wouldn't put her in BOP custody because they were afraid she'd get preferential treatment. She's in state custody. She's actually in a state joint on the West Coast. And from what I understand, after a certain amount of years, I guess she said, just go ahead and move on. They decided to move on. I know they have a child in common, and then I'm sure he's probably maybe bringing her to see him, or someone is. But there's still a lot of people at the prison, even after that, wore bracelets that supported her. A lot of the BOP, tried to raise money, and they don't feel that she was treated fairly by the United States attorney. Yeah, good luck. Join the club.
Yeah, they probably, they feel that way. But, at the end of the day, I mean, they think of prisoners, people like her, think of prisoners as second-class citizens. Yeah, I wish someone would smash him. I do believe in the court papers that there was mention of cigarettes being exchanged, and
right. Well then more, because I know you dig into all that with the FOIA and everything. I didn't hear the cigarettes, but like you said, I never read it. But this is all secondhand from guys that were there. But everyone tells it their way.
I think it was both ways. I think that dude wanted to act like he was cool. She's like, yo, I'm going to look out for you. Smash this dude. We're going to put him in the cell. But I want people to understand that this shit happens all the time in federal prison where, someone might have disrespected a cop and they're like, yo, I'm going to put this dude in here, smash him. I'm going to look out for you. I got some extra trays for you. Got a couple extra Christmas bags I think we might have back there. And food is hard to come by sometimes when you're in the hole. So when they offer you a couple extra trays and, yo, look, this dude, man, right here disrespected us. I got that Christmas bag for you. I got 3 of them, bro.
I got the Thanksgiving meal bag. I got the Christmas bag. I got, the chicken wings and pizza tray. You don't get in a hole, and that's a great incentive. Sure, of course it happens, I
mean, this is the reality of federal prison, and there's like federal judges that don't realize, the things that happen in these places, and I'll be straight up with you. I went and met with my federal judge the other day. I went to his chambers, we talked, and, I told him a little bit about, federal prison, and he acknowledged that it is a dangerous place. I used to think that they were immune to, the dangers and the people getting killed. And, after the Whitey Bulger thing, it seems like that went into the media where people were like, oh my God, they're killing people in federal prison? Yeah. They're killing people in federal prison all the time.
Right before I retired, we had a murder at Penn 1. I was part of the evidence recovery team. I helped work the case. We had a guy stabbed right in the unit. He was killed right through his lung. He bled to death on the tier.
What's it like for you as an officer? Someone gets murdered and you respond, something like that. Do you feel bad inside? Like, damn, man, or is it just another day at work?
Unfortunately, I was desensitized to it from being in Iraq. I saw a lot of death and destruction. And when I walked into the prison, seeing fights and seeing blood and stuff, unfortunately, I was desensitized to that it didn't, do I feel bad? Of course, if someone died, yeah. But I used to come in and see all the, the stabbings and the guys that mutilate themselves. I mean, it's just something I kind of know how to, I guess, in the military, they teach you how to compartmentalize stuff, how to take things, put it in a little locker and lock it up, and then move forward and keep continuing with the mission. Because you and I both know if we're in federal prison and you're stabbed and you're dead, Chad, we're still going to have a move in 20 minutes. Lunch is still going to go down. I'm still going to be serving. Dinner's still going to go down. The chow hall is going to be open. Nothing stops. You understand? Nothing stops. So you realize, and that's how they, it's like, wow, somebody died. Shouldn't there be? No, keep going. You know what I mean? Wreck call.
Prison never closes. That's one thing. Prison is always open 24/7.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Let me ask you this. When there's a lockdown, are the cops happy? Or are they like, oh, it's a pain in the ass? Or are they good, man? We can just do nothing.
Some people like lockdowns. Some people like me hated them. I hated lugging around the carts and doing all that. Remember, I was an old guy, I liked interacting because I'm a talker. You can see that. I'd rather go around. I talk to everybody. That unit was like my town. I would walk around, say hello to everybody. I knew who, I kind of knew a little bit about everybody because, like I said, I come from the military. I I read all the PSIs. I read everything. I know everything about you before I talk to you. I just ask you questions. I already know the answers to it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to see if you're on the level with me. And that's just basic, you know, military, police, intelligence, interrogate tactics that I learned. And I'm not, it's just, I just naturally do it. But I walked around there because I want to know your regular behavior. Because if one day I walk in and you're not being the same old Chad, then something's going on. And I need to know that. I need to be cognizant of that, or why you're not being the way you are today. You understand? I just need to be aware of that because something could go down with you. And I would see guys and you could tell, you know, when they go off their meds, or I just, you know, I could tell there were certain guys I knew just, we'd be on a lockdown for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And then I knew this guy and he would just go from sitting on his bed every day. And then next thing you know, he's pacing like a fucking tiger in a cage. And you know, he's about to go off on somebody. You could tell, and then you know they're gonna let it. You know, and then next thing I know, he throws his food at one of the officers when she tries to feed him. You know, and they want to take him to the hole. But like you could see this. It's like when you know people's personalities and you really learn them, and you do your job as an officer. You know, you should be able to read that.
Yeah, I mean, were there days when, you know, you went to work where you worried, like, damn, man, I could die in here? People are getting killed in here?
I wasn't afraid, like, oh, my God, I'm going to call in sick. I was just always aware of where I was. It was just, you know, I knew it was a dangerous environment. I understood, you know, like I said, I used to look for bombs, man. I'm not saying, you know, that I know. Of course, I'm always cognizant, I'm aware, I'm vigilant, but what are you going to do? Be paralyzed with fear? I can get in a traffic accident and get killed too. I'm not, you know what I mean? Shit happens.
I understand, but I was in there and I looked at things the same way, but there were times when things happened. I'm like, damn, man. I mean, I was more at risk than you were, but I'm like, damn, man, this is a dangerous situation. I want to go back to the compassionate thing, right? Where I asked, you know, when someone dies, you know, being in the military, you got desensitized. I did too, just from being in prison. But I mean, you're a human being at the end of the day, regardless of what you've seen. And that's why I wanted to ask you, did you ever have compassion where you were all right with a dude and you're like, man, this kid's all right, man. And then next thing you know, he's getting stabbed in the unit. You're like, damn, man, they stabbed that kid?
Oh, sure. Yes. Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember going, why'd you chase so-and-so out? He was looked like a good guy, looked like a good kid, you know, whatever. I would go talk about, why'd you chase so-and-so? Why'd you run him up? You know, they wouldn't, you know, a lot of them would give me, well, you know, politics, Farlow, they would say things like that. But I thought he was a pretty cool kid, you know, you know, and they run him up or they beat him up, you know. There was one kid, he was a comedian. I used to call him the comedian, and because he was actually a stand-up comedian, and he ended up getting 27 years for, he was doing something, these girls were underage, and he was like pimping them on like, what was that old thing that they closed down, that website?
You might know what it is. Backpage?
Yeah, one of the, yeah, he was part of that before they shut it down. He was like one of the girls like lied and said she was 18, something like that. And he was telling the truth. I read his thing, but they hit him with a big sentence, but he was a comedian. And I watched some of his YouTube stuff. Man, he came back from the softball field one day. He looked like, you ever see Rocky 2 where the eyes busted open, like cut me Mick and shit, and his nose was hanging off the side of his face. And of course I'm like, what happened to you? He's like, I was on the softball field. I got hit in the face with a baseball or something. And I'm like, he always would laugh and make a joke, and then he wouldn't make a joke anymore. And I looked at him and I'm like, it's not funny, is it? He's like, I ain't built for this shit, Farlow. That's what he said to me. He turned and he walked away. I felt so bad for this kid. He just wasn't he wasn't a tough guy. He was a comedian. He just, you know, yeah, he fucked up big time, but I felt real bad for him.
Let me ask you this, because, you know, you went in there and you said, hey, you do something wrong, I'm going to tell on you. I've been a cop for 20 years in the military. Don't mess around. Did they label you an inmate lover or like a snitch on cops?
Oh,
was there a pushback?
Hug a thug. Hug a thug.
I've heard that. I've heard that about other cops.
That's what they did. You hug a thug, something like that, because listen, I guess they recognized me and sent me to be a core correctional communications instructor. In other words, I became the de-escalation instructor because I was recognized for my ability to communicate with people and to de-escalate. They actually sent me to Atlanta for a 1-week course where I had to dress with a suit and like actually look like a professional. And I learned from these highly educated. Now listen, I'm just a G7 officer. I'm the lowest ranking guy in the class. All these people are 12s. Yeah. And I'm in the class, but I'm going to be the C3 instructor to teach all the annual training to teach officers how to de-escalate. I'm also the guy they used to call when we used to put teams together. I was the negotiator. So you know what I mean? They would use me for that. So these guys, I would be like, one time we had a guy, he didn't want to cuff up, this and that. Oh, no. He slipped the cuffs and he kept one and he wouldn't give it back. That's what it was. And they had the whole team suited up, and I ended up talking to the guy for like an hour outside the door, and they're all dressed up in their friggin', the goon shit, wearing all that. Now I'm the negotiator, so I'm just wearing my shirt, and I'm talking to the guy, and we're talking about he's from St. Louis and all this other shit. And after about an hour, I finally gave him to give him to me. Right? So he gave them to me, and they're all waiting outside. What the fuck, Farlow? You wasted an hour. We could have went in there. I said, you could have went in there, separated your shoulder, tore your ligament in the knee, fell on, broke your arm. But guess what? You waited a little bit, and I talked, and I got the handcuffs, asshole. There you go. You know what I mean? You could have waited. You want to run in there. You're not in this. You get hurt, too, just as much as these guys. You know what I mean? You're not paying me. And I used to tell them, you're not paying me to be an MMA fighter. You're not giving me $22-3 million to fight people on concrete, buddy. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Let me ask you about that spinal injury, man. How'd that happen?
Oh, Jesus. I ended up getting an infection through my eye, a staph infection that I got in the prison. And it infected my eye, but they misdiagnosed it as pink eye, and they treated it for pink eye. Finally, when they figured it out after my eyes were bleeding, like it was like The Exorcist, finally they figured it out that it's a staph infection, and they treated it as the staph infection. It went away on my eyes, but it didn't go away. It traveled to my spine. Damn. And it caused an abscess, an infection in my thoracic 6, my T6 vertebrae. And I didn't realize it. I was getting in severe back pains, but you know what? We were always on lockdowns. I was always lifting carts. I'm 20 years in the military, my back, you know what I mean? And they just kept giving me muscle relaxers, which were masking it. And the next thing I know, I woke up one morning and I couldn't move my legs and I pissed myself. And that's when I found out that I had a staph infection that infiltrated my spinal cord and paralyzed me from the waist down. And they told me I was never going to walk again. I would never be able to get an erection again and all this other stuff. And 3 years later, they're back up.
Is that when your girl left you? I'm joking, bro. Did you hear me?
She left me before. My wife left me. No. She left me. Yeah, I know. I don't care. No, but she left. Here's the thing. It was like I got divorced. Then I was paying all his lawyer's money, and then it rolled into this. You know what I'm saying? It was like fucking, and that was it. But
I wasn't talking about leaving you because of the staph infection. I said because you said you were hit from the waist down. So
hey,
I figured
she wasn't giving it up anyway. What difference does it make?
Hey man, this is a show for kids, bro. Anyway, let's move on, dude. Did you end up suing him? Did you get any money out of it?
I didn't get any money. I got my full retirement, and that's pretty much it. That's what they gave me.
Well, listen, man.
If I would have, it would have been too hard to sue them because it would just be me. I would need if I had 20 other people that got it, then it would be a class action. No lawyer would take it. It's too much. It would call it. What are you going to do? Spend $5 million to win $5 million? You know what I mean? Maybe. Maybe you win $3 million and you spent $5. Remember, I'm one person. No lawyer would take the case.
Well, listen, man, before we get ready to go, right, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you miss the job?
I miss the job. Sometimes I do. I miss like being like, there was a lot of times like I would have like guys would tell me that they're completing a course or things like that. And I miss like hearing, like I would hear guys got out and they would call guys that were still in would call them how's Petey doing? Oh, he's doing great. He's got a job. He met a girl. She's pregnant. And I just like hearing those. I like hearing a good story. I'm a sucker for a good happy ending of a story. So those were good things. And I also love to watch when, you know, guys would get their, like when President Trump put the Compassionate Release Act in place, which helped a lot of guys, you know, and guys were starting that had no hope, all of a sudden, boom, had a gleam of hope in their eye, a glimmer of hope. And that was always a cool thing to watch. But other than that, no.
Well, this thing's going to cut off on us, so I'm just going to tell people, man, I hope that they like this interview. We're going to do a part 2 because I got to think of things I want to ask you. I want to do a part 2. So I'm going to tell people, man, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Make sure you share the video, leave a comment. We're going to do a part 2, and I'm going to have to sit back and think about some things. And then
think about some things. Think about what you got.
All right. With respect, man, Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother.
We're out.